Hello, I am Xarkun, and this is World of Warships Legends. Today, I want to talk to you about how to survive better and be more effective in your battleship. So, for this lesson, we're featuring the legendary tier Japanese battleship Yamato, one of the most powerful battleships in the game. And the ultimate theme of this video is going to be doing what it takes to get yourself into an effective position with the battleship and also surviving. So the first thing I want to talk about is you're not going to see me turn my nose toward where I think the threats are. We've just spawned near the alpha cap, and you can see what we're doing is we're turning away. We're turning toward the center of the map. Why are we doing that? Well, because generally on most maps, when teams spawn, they're going to push either the western or eastern flank. Very few ships are going to go in the center. And so I like to try, whenever possible, to acquire a centralized position in a battleship. Why? Because if you are in the center and you've got battleships or cruisers pushing toward either of the flanks, then you will have access to the broadsides of those ships from your centralized position, and you can get all of your guns on target and try to punish them as they push in. That is ultimately what the job of the battleship is, by the way, is to use its artillery power to punish broadsides of ships pushing in. And in order to access those broadsides, generally you want to get into a centralized position. Also, the fact that we aren't turning bow in here. Take note of this enemy Yamato doing exactly what I am predicting the enemy is going to do, which is push toward the flank. That is what they like to do. We're trying to get toward the center, not quite there yet, but we're centralized enough that this Yamato pushing the flank is exposing broadside to us, and so we are able to punish him. Now, I think a lot of players in this situation would see this kind of thing and think, I need to try to bow tank this guy. No. What would the benefit of bow tanking be in this situation? There really wouldn't be one. You can see I've got my nose pointed away from the Yamato, I've got my stern pointed toward him, and I'm basically at sort of a kiting angle, right? And having my nose pointed away from the Yamato also means I have my nose pointed away from that alpha cap. And we can see that there are the outlines of two enemy destroyers inside of that cap. If I were to point my nose at that cap and try to bow tank that Yamato, then I would be pointing right toward those two destroyers, and they could launch torpedoes at me. Now, you might say that's not an ideal way for a destroyer to launch its torpedo. They're probably going to only hit you with one, maybe two, and not kill you. Yes, that's true. If you're in a destroyer, you generally want to torpedo the broadside of a battleship to get more torpedoes to hit, and if you're torpedoing one that's pointed nose at you, well, then a lot of your torpedoes are probably going to miss. But the key here is, if we were to point bow in at that Yamato, and we were to take a torpedo, and then we wanted to get out of that position to avoid any further torpedoes, we would have to turn around, which is a long, laborious process, and would probably open us up to eating even more torpedoes. Instead, we point away from that Yamato, we get all of our guns on target to him, and we're able to ultimately take him out, dealing nearly 50,000 damage to him. And you can see that he's dealt some damage to us, but we came out on top, and because he was pointed in, we did have a friendly destroyer in that cap, and I believe that friendly destroyer might have gotten some torpedoes on him, or else the battleship right next to us here chimed in with some of his firepower. In any case, though, we did not want to point bow in. Pointing bow in means generally you're only going to get your front two guns on the enemy ships, and of course this sort of specific thing that I'm talking about right now applies mostly to battleships with a turret setup like Yamato, you know, the two super firing turrets in the front, the one in the rear. It also applies equally to battleships like the Amagi or the Vanguard or the Conqueror or something like that, where all the guns are down the center line and you've got 2 turrets up front, 2 in back. You want to use all of your turrets whenever possible. You want to maximize your firepower in a battleship. That 3rd turret isn't just there for decoration, and the way that you consistently and effectively utilize it is by taking a kiting position like this, where you're angled away from the enemy. You can disengage if necessary, and you can still get all of your guns on target. Generally speaking, that is a more effective way to maneuver your battleship. It means that you can disengage when necessary, it means you're angled against targets, and it means you can get all of your guns on the targets. Now, we're taking a look at this Alaska here. Note we finally acquired our centralized position, but there aren't a lot of large ships in this game for us to punish because there are so many destroyers. So we're going to shoot at this Alaska. He is, of course, a radar cruiser, so he's a threat to our remaining destroyers, and we want to make sure that he can't spot them with his radar at any point, so we got to get him off the board. And we hit him for nearly 20k there with that salvo. Guns are nearly reloaded, and hopefully one more salvo is all it's going to take to send this guy to the bottom of the sea. And the guns are reloaded, so the shot is going to be out, and hopefully this will be the killing blow. Let's see here. Shot looks good, and what's that? 2 citadels, the Alaska goes down. Meanwhile, we have made a mistake here. This entire time we've known there is a Shimakaze pursuing us, and of course, if you don't want to get hit by torpedoes from a destroyer, the best way to avoid that is to sail away from the destroyer, because it becomes exponentially more difficult for a destroyer to torpedo a target that's moving away from it, due to the limitations of torpedo ranges and the fact that you are sailing in the opposite direction that the torpedoes are coming. But since we sort of turned in to kill that Alaska, well, we did slow ourselves down, and the result is we take 1 torp from the Shima. So now we really have to turn, keep that Shima behind us, and only now, when there are no other ships left in the game, no other big ships, and we generally know the position of at least the Shimakaze, and we suspect that maybe there is another destroyer out here by the Charlie Cap, but in any case, our maneuverability, if it's compromised, it is not necessarily the end of the world here, particularly if we can finish this enemy Yamato quickly. Only at this point do we point our bow at our enemy. And bow tanking, you know, in situations like this, it is useful. But as a general strategy, as your go-to strategy, I don't think it's useful. Now, in the Yamato specifically, the Yamato has 18.1-inch guns. They can overmatch 32 millimeters of armor, and of course the Yamato has 32 millimeter bow plating, so we can each overmatch each other. But the key in Yamato versus Yamato fights is you don't really want to angle if you're going bow in. You want to just point your bow straight at the enemy Yamato. Why? Well, because right underneath the front super firing turret, there is a plate of armor that when you angle the ship, it becomes almost flat, and big battleship caliber guns can punch right through it and potentially hit your citadel. Just like this. We're aiming at exactly the correct point. We do 20k right through his bow. Unfortunately, no citadel, but we do get the high caliber metal, and just like that, the last battleship is down. Now there are only 2 destroyers left. We've racked up 158,000 damage, and we've been quite effective in our role as a battleship, punishing the broadside of other battleships and taking out the enemy radar cruiser. But oftentimes, in situations like this, it's not always enough to carry a game. In fact, you need a lot of things to go in your favor to carry a game in a battleship. The destroyer, as I've said for a long time now, is the unit that wins games because of its ability to cap and because of its ability to spot. So, a lot of the times, even if you're going to play well in a battleship, and you are going to survive and deal a lot of damage and generally be effective, it might not be enough to win the game. Essentially, no ship is an island in this game, right? It's a team game that relies on the team coming together and playing for the win, right? So you're a unit of a team. You're not the only one on the team, and your teammates are going to have to do something to positively contribute to the outcome of a match if you're going to win. At this point, we've really done all we can, and now we're going to turn and try to help our teammates against these destroyers. We think that this is probably a pretty safe move. There's a Khabarovsk out there. We're going to be able to shoot him, and you know what? Maybe we'll even be able to take this Charlie cap as well. But we weren't counting on the Shimakaze being able to come out from behind that island and YOLO us. And that is unfortunate, because he is going to kill us, and we're not going to be able to kill him. Honestly, I'm not sure how he managed to get into that position. Take note of the friendly Khabarovsk right there, shooting at the enemy Khabarovsk. The Shimakaze had to get around this guy right here to go around this island and torpedo me. So, good job to him. Although, frankly, I think that was a waste of his resources throughout the entirety of the game, because he spent the entirety of the game chasing me from the Alpha cap all the way to the Charlie cap, and only at the very end was he able to land enough torpedoes on me to kill me. So if you're in a destroyer, your goal is not to pursue battleships like that, especially me. All I did was waste that Shima's time for the entire course of this game. He's much more stealthy than the Khabarovsk. He could have capped A. Notice that A is in blue hands. He could have gone back and capped that. He could have tried to cap B. He could have tried to do something useful for his team. Killing me, ultimately, is probably the least useful thing he could have done. And now he has only got this. There's him, right there. He goes down. And now it's only the Khabarovsk left versus the friendly Khabarovsk and the final friendly battleship, who sort of followed me through this game, which you don't necessarily want to do. You don't want two battleships right in the same position like we were. That GK, if he had sort of spread out away from me and tried to, shoot at the targets I was shooting at from different angles, develop crossfires, that would have been okay. But ultimately, I don't think he was super effective during this game. But I do want to take note of what this Khabarovsk here is doing, because I think it is effective. He's kiting the enemy Khabarovsk out of the cap, which means that that enemy Khabarovsk isn't going to take Bravo. So his team is not going to start gaining points from holding that cap. That's very important. Getting that Khabarovsk to leave the cap is good, and at this point it's sort of a battle of attrition between the two of them, taking shots at each other, trying to dodge. You can see neither one of them is really getting super effective hits on each other, but the enemy Shima is out of the cap, and he's sailing toward the friendly one. And there is an island to the left of his ship, or to the right of the screen. Behind that island is the friendly Grosse Kurfürst, and you can see the GK just took some optimistic shots at the enemy Khabarovsk over that island, but the shells hit the island. Well, once that Khabarovsk clears the island, then the GK is going to have a clear shot at him, and he's going to be able to potentially chime in and help out the friendly Khabarovsk. So basically, this game is in the bag, and we've got it won. And I think we played a pretty good, effective battleship game, where we easily could have died early on against 4 enemy destroyers, but we didn't. Thanks almost entirely due to our own positioning and our own strategy of not relying on bow tanking as a first and primary resort, and not relying on pushing in instantly as a first and primary resort. Again, I think far too many players think that is the only way to play a battleship, and it's not. In fact, your battleship games, I think, should look a little bit more like this one in terms of positioning. And that really is the key to battleship survivability, is positioning effectively. Most of the time, that is going to mean kiting away from the threats early on in the game and only pushing aggressively bow in when a lot of the threats have been eliminated and you can take fights where you don't really have to disengage. That, I think, is the biggest takeaway from this video, and the thing I think you guys should know the most about battleship survivability. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.